Hello, everyone, and welcome to January 2018's first webinar of 2018. This month, we are covering the Flexquery reports plugin for Retail Pro 9. So we were going to do a number of different plugins, but we've had quite a few clients install the Flexquery or purchase the Flexquery plugin over the past couple months. And there's been kind of a request for a brief overview / basic training on it. So we thought that we'd focus on that one this month, and then maybe next month we'll go in and tackle some of the other plugins available for Retail Pro 9. Now, if you attended the Retail Pro 8 versus Retail Pro 9 webinar, you will remember in the section we did on upgrading concerns, we discussed some limitations of the built-in reports tool for Retail Pro 9. So to kind of summarize that conversation, Retail Pro 9 benefits in many ways from its new Oracle database, which is a massive improvement over the flat file database used in Retail Pro 8. But because of the way the data is stored on these separate huge tables of data, links have to be established between common fields in order to access data from multiple tables at one time. So for example, your customers table and your sales table needs a link if you want to do a report on customer sales. These links are not easily created or programmed. Creating new reports in Retail Pro 9 requires SQL programming knowledge or experience. Even small changes on your reports to displayed fields and fonts require learning a completely separate program in order to make those changes. So because of this, we generally tell clients and consider Retail Pro 9's basic reports to be static, so uneditable. Okay, so I'll open Retail Pro 9 reports if you've never seen it before. You can see in here under reports, unlike Retail Pro 8, there is no, let's close this off, whatever someone was working on. There's no editing options. So let me say this one more time. So the reports you find in there's over 100, but there's no way to edit any of those reports. They are considered completely static. You'll see these are all the reports here. So we've got our report groups, same as we had in Retail Pro 8. Audit reports, which are going to be your really detailed transaction level reports, or journals, lists, merchandise reports, and summaries. So there are quite a few stock reports in here. They do work for some small businesses, but we find most of our clients, especially the ones that are on planning, outgrow the stock reports because they're looking for more in-depth information. They're looking for information that's not available. We have no editing options. I mean, there is an edit here, but it requires you to go in and start importing new fields and creating those links between tables. As far as the editing that you would be familiar with in Retail Pro 8, where you could add some extra fields from the table, you could change the sizes, you could move the columns, none of that is available in Retail Pro 9. All right, so these reports are going to print out exactly as they are displayed each time without any real option to go in there and change them, unless you want to either learn some programming language or at the very least some editing in one of the tools that are out there, like Crystal Reports, for editing these types of reports. And that's basically just going to get you your display and layouts, maybe some different fields here and there. But if you actually want to create new report options with new fields and stuff like that, you got to get into programming. So because of this limitation, that's been one of the big areas of concern for customers in their upgrade to Retail Pro 9. Lots of customers come with a big stock of custom reports they've built in Retail Pro 8, and it can be a bit frustrating to try and figure out where what's what in Retail Pro 9, or that they don't have that same level of customization. So in comes Flexquery. Flexquery is kind of in the middle. So it does not give you the same options you had in Retail Pro 8 as far as just pressing new and creating a brand new report from scratch. So I'm going to open Flexquery up. You'll see in here it comes with a stock of what they call source queries. So these are similar to these stock reports you see in Retail Pro 9. But then on top of that, it gives you some really good, really easy to learn customization options for adding or removing fields that are available, display, sizing, exporting, printing, everything that you're kind of used to in the modifications from Retail Pro 8. The only main difference here is that instead of going into one of your journal, your merchandise, your summary report, and being able to create one from scratch, you do have to build your custom reports in Flexquery off one of the source queries, the source tables, the source reports that they give you access to. On the plus side, they've really expanded on the amount available from Retail Pro 8 or from Retail Pro 9 stock. So if I expand on all these, there are just tons and tons of reports in here. One of the biggest, I would say the biggest challenge when it comes to learning Flexquery is just kind of figuring out which source query is going to get you the fields, the columns that you want in your report so that you can start modifying it from there. It's pretty rare that we find a report or some data that you're looking for that you can't find in one of these source queries, but sometimes it does take a bit of trial and error to find the source query that you're looking for. And for that reason, they have grouped them all up into these different areas, categories, and types. Okay, so we can see the area here, comparisons, categories, comparison again, and then we've got sales inventory. So a bunch of different comparison reports available in here for your inventory and sales. Let's see, KPIs, key performance indicators. So a lot of different key performance indicating reports. You've got your GMROI, margins, any sort of calculated fields like that are going to be available in your KPIs. Merchandise reports, you can get into some basic to really complicated. One of the ones that we get a lot of requests for, there is a inventory by date. So a lot of Retail Pro 8 clients will do their physical inventory, and then all of a sudden they'll give us a call and say, oh, you know what, I forgot to print my on-hand report for before my physical. What do I do now? And there's no way in Retail Pro 8 to run a report for an on-hand from a previous point in time, but you can do that now in Retail Pro 9. Okay, so in Retail Pro 8, it got into complicated, we're going to do the on-hand now, and then we're going to start subtracting everything that you've received and adding everything that you sold back and trying to find that historical number. We can do that just with the click of a button now in Flexquery. Okay, with Retail Pro 9. We've got a large set of tools. You'll see at the bottom here, we've got some extra options as well. Change users, so you can have multiple users in Flexquery. And then you can choose which reports you want to share with the rest of the users and which ones you want to just keep to yourself. We've got a whole tab here on the main page called My Flexquery. So once we've taken a source query, one of these stock reports, we've modified it. So maybe we've changed the layout. We've changed the columns and fields we're going to see. We've filtered it down to a specific department or store. We want to save that so we can easily run that same report next time. We do this, we save it to My Flexquery, and then we can put it into a group and run that report the next time we need it. So if it's a report that we run every month, we could save it into a group called Monthly Reports. We've got the date field set to automatically look at last month. You just come in and double click that report on the first of the month, and it's ready to go. Okay, so unlike Retail Pro 9 where you're kind of stuck with whatever's built in there, we can save the customizations that you make in Flexquery to My Flexquery so they're available for later. And a recent update has even given us the option to start scheduling reports. Okay, so you could save them to a group that you scheduled to run, on the 31st at midnight once all that sales data has been collected. Then when you come in on the 1st, the next month, those reports are ready and waiting for you. Okay, so that's another new feature that they've recently added that clients are really looking forward to, and we're just kind of testing it out on our own as well. But it looks like it works great, and it'll be a big improvement for some customers who are used to scheduled reports in Retail Pro 8. So we, under the source queries again, We've got a couple different types. We should also be able to find get into some lists. Okay, so those are the basic list report that you saw in Retail Pro 8. Employees, store, subsidiary, and as well as we've got purchasing, sales, transaction summaries, and transfers. Now, these are all organized right now by area. So this up here is what we call the grouping bar. It's available in your reports, this dark blue bar up here, and that determines how your fields are grouped. So right now they're grouped up by area, but I could switch that to category or by type simply by dragging the order of these fields in the grouping bar. If I didn't want them grouped up at all, if I just wanted to see every report listed out, I can drag these fields down into their columns, which is where they start, and I'm just going to get an entire list of all the reports with the type, category, and area listed separately. All right, we'll get more into kind of how the customization works, but even on the menus in Flexquery, you're getting kind of an idea of the features that you have access to when you're running a report. So let's say I prefer to organize my reports by type. There's my inventory reports. My vouchers down here at the bottom if I need to do a receiving report, received items. Okay, and we can just quickly swap these fields back and forth to find the one that we're looking for. In addition, we've also got, when we find the report that we're looking for, we've got some date ranges that we can work with. So if I look up a simple, let's do a sales, stock performance, product performance report. So this one, I was playing around with it a bit earlier, so I set the default date, or the last date that it was run at, to be 4 months ago, start 4 months ago and run for 4 months. Okay, I wanted a September to December report. So this date field can be altered before you run the report. Whenever you're kind of going into the source queries, you're trying to find a report, a source one that has the fields and the data that you're looking for, always going to recommend that you pick a really small period of time, maybe just the last week, maybe the last month, but nothing too big that you're going to be waiting, a couple minutes for that report to finish before you can check and see what columns are available. Okay, so these are your date ranges here, and then if your date range has some options or start and end dates, you can select those on the side. So if I set it to fixed period, we have access to the date field, and I can set my dates exactly. Or if we pick a dynamic date range, like let's do this week, it'll adjust the dates on its own. Okay, we also have access to one more option down here called design mode. So what design mode is it's built specifically for when you're looking to build a new report. You just want to go in there and see what fields are available. It's only going to load up the first 100 results of the report, so it runs really fast no matter what type of report you're looking for. You just need to be a little careful in design mode because sometimes because it's only pulling up 100 results, you're not going to see the data you're looking for even if the fields are there. So pay more attention to what fields are available instead of the data itself, because you might say, well, this report's only reporting on a specific department. Well, it might not be. It's just that just happened to be the first 100 items it came across were all in the same department. Okay, so if we take this product performance report and we run it for this week, let's say in design mode, and we'll give this a second. Well, looks like our data that they've imported might not have any sales from these 7. So let's go ahead and do it for last week. See if this demo data has any sales for that. This is all demo data that we get from Retail Pro. So depending on when they last updated it, we might not see some stock movement or performance transactions in there for until it was updated last. Okay, so they've got 27 results. So because this is a product performance, we're probably looking at 27 different items that were sold between the last week, so that was the 31st of December to the 6th of January. Okay, just going to clear a couple of these fields off. So this is what the report looks like. Currently, we can see that it's sorted by UPC. We've got a little arrow on here. We can sort by any one of these fields that we would like to. So for instance, I've got a description on here. If I click on description, I can sort by description instead of UPC. Maybe I want to do it by department name. So we're going to sort it by department name, starting with A and then working our way down. In addition, I'm just going to close this report quick. In addition to the dates, we also have a couple extra fields on the front here I want to cover before we start running reports. So we've got a search field up at the top here. This works great on the My Flexquery. If you're in a bigger company and you've got, 5-10 people that are each creating, running their own reports, the search is great for quickly finding the one that you're looking for. Similar to Retail Pro 8, users will often save the report with their name in front of it. You can quickly search up to pull any of those reports that you were looking for as well. Okay, so if we type physical inventory, it's going to highlight any reports in the My Flexquery that have that name, or we could do that for the source queries as well. But I don't think it's going to find any because that was a custom name that they've given a report. While we're going through the source queries, you might notice on a few of the reports, if I expand all of these, an extra option becomes available. Let's see if we can find on. Here we go. Some of these customer invoices, some of these reports contain so much data, or they have the possibility to contain so much data, they give you this high capacity option down here. Clicking on this is just going to allocate a bit of extra resources to running the report, so it runs a bit faster on some of your more detailed reports. So customer invoice is looking at, not just your sales of an item, but every single receipt with all the items and all the other information on it. So, a report like that could get quite detailed. There's going to be hundreds of available fields. You can use high capacity to sort of speed it along. Okay. In addition to high capacity, there's 3 main modes for running a report. We've got data, chart, and pivot. Data is the raw results. So exactly what data it's pulling out of Retail Pro when it runs the report. Some clients prefer to grab the data and then move it into Excel or some other program where they're more comfortable manipulating it. Chart allows you to do some quick performance charts. If you just want to have a quick graphical look at some of the data, you can use chart mode. And pivot is where you can get into really customizing the grouping and the look and feel of the report. Okay, so pivot is where you can start. Data might give you every item by UPC that was sold for a period of time. Pivot is where you can start saying, okay, group it up by department, then group it up by size. I want to see my departments and then my size breakdowns. All right, so that's kind of options that while they have some, there's some options for grouping in data. It's you can get much cleaner, easier to read, grouped up reports in your pivot mode. And we'll get right into each one of these in just a minute. So let's find a good solid query here that's going to yield some enough results that we can start customizing a report. So I'm going to go back into my sales area and stock management, performance, and we're going to do this inventory product performance report again. But this time, instead of last week, we're going to run it for, let's say, the last 4 months. So I'm going to say X months, starting Y months ago. I want to go back 4 months, and I want to run it for 4 months. So that's going to go back to September because it's going to go back to 4 complete months, not counting the one that we're on, and it's going to run it for 4 months from there all the way up until the end of the year. Okay. Once I've got my report, my query selected, my date chosen, I can choose to either double click it, which is going to run it in data mode by default, or I can choose to open it directly into pivot or chart. Okay, so I'm going to choose data. and we'll just give this a minute. It's pulled up 2,323 items. Okay, so not too bad. We've got a report that is at the UPC level that we ran, brought back 2,300 results, and it took less than a minute to run. Okay, so that's pretty detailed. Not a ton of results because it's just based off the stock data that's in here. But we do find Flexquery pretty efficient. I've got a couple of these fields that are kind of messy looking. Okay, accessories on 2 lines, some of these description on multiple lines. What I can do when I run it is right click after running it, go to best fit all column widths. So right click on any column, go to best fit. It's just going to stretch everything out a bit so each result is on its own line. You can see we've got some default, right now we're on the default layout, we've got some default fields, subsidiary name, UPC, alternate lookup, our DCS code, vendor code, description, description 2, attribute size, department name, class, so on. And then I've got a couple performance indicators over here on the right. Okay, so let's also have another look at, just kind of the stock information that we're looking at here before we start customizing. So first thing, down here at the bottom is our date. So this is the date we ran it for. If you're used to Retail Pro 8 reports, if you want to change the date, you have to close it, go back in, set your date, set your filter, do it all over again. With Flexquery, it's already kind of got it ready to go. So if you want to change the date, you can change it while you're inside the report. Just press the little refresh button, and you don't have to exit the report and go back into it. It's going to save a little bit of time. Okay, so you can keep modifying that. If you want to do a report by month, you can just keep modifying that month or that date, refreshing it, and printing or exporting your report. You could also run it for the entire year, and then if you have a month field in there or a date fields, you can start filtering as well, and we'll get into the filtering. You can see this is our navigation bar. We currently had highlighted result 14 of 2323. So we go back up to the first record. We can use this to skip down between records. Next page is going to take you to the bottom record of each page. So I'll just kind of go through giving you a view of each result. And then there's your last record as well. Okay, refresh data, save bookmark. So if there's a specific result in a report you want to mark, you can press save bookmark. So I've got this, looks like someone was in here, they created a Remington rifle. So you can bookmark a result as well. And then you get the go-to bookmark. So you can go back to there. So just a little way to set a marker on a specific result that you can refer to later. Okay, filter data we'll cover once we start getting into the filters. This little button here is we're going to access the filter builder in a couple minutes. So next, we've got this little arrow here on UPC. That's our current sorting. So right now we're sorted by UPC. Maybe I want to sort this by department name. Okay, so I've got my DCS over here, and then my department name. And I'm kind of wondering why they're not together. So moving columns around, in Retail Pro 8 reports, it's kind of going out and adjusting the column position in the settings and then saving it and going back into the report. In Flexquery, it's as easy as just clicking down on the column heading, dragging it across where you want it to go, and letting go. So I can do that for my department name, my class name, and my subclass name. All right, quick and easy, move those fields over to where I want them for my, let's say my Excel export. Then I've got my vendor code, description 1 and 2, attribute and size. Perfect. That's kind of everything in the order I want. I only have one subsidiary though. So Retail Pro 9 gives you the option for multiple subsidiaries. It lets you have separate inventory costs for different groups of stores. So if you have it's maybe a U.S. subsidiary, or some stores will have a clearance outlet and a regular sales stores. If you have separate costs for inventory, then you would need to create a separate subsidiary. This is just a basic store demo, so we can hide this column. All right, we get the right click on the heading, go to hide this column. Maybe UPC I don't need to see as well. You know, whatever reason I'm exporting this for, it's not necessary to have the UPC. I can hide that one as well and just keep my alternate lookup. So that's just basic moving around some fields, but maybe the fields I'm looking for are missing. So we've got two options for looking through the other fields that are available to this report. So don't think that when you first run the report that every field that's on there are the fields that are available. For almost every report I can think of, it's not even close. These are all the fields that are available to this report. Not only are they available, but the data on each one of them is ready to go. If I check off quantity sold, press that little asterisk again, it's added it. The data is ready to go. So when it ran the report, it's collected all the data for all these fields that are available on my product performance report. It's just only displaying what I want it to. Sometimes when you run a stock query, it contains every single field by default. You don't need to go through clicking, unchecking all the ones you're not looking for. Just right click on the columns, go to hide all columns, and then start selecting the columns that you want in your report. Okay, there's two ways to add them again. First is the little asterisk here. So what this one does is it groups them up kind of by type. So you see you've got all these store fields, subsidiary, SBS stands for subsidiary, style, some UDFs. It kind of groups them up in order by type, but that can be a little tough because they're not in alphabetical order. We also have the choose fields button on the right, which groups up, is going to give us a list of all our fields in alphabetical order. So if you know the fields you're looking for, the choose fields is often a little easier. If you're kind of unsure and you just want to see, I like the asterisk button over on the right because it's kind of group them up by type. So again, I want to see, let's go into our DCS code, department name, class name, subclass name. You can drag it right up on here, so you don't need to go back into the report to drag it up. And then I want to see my description 1, 2, attribute, size. What else were we looking at? Let's see. Let's add some information. So our cost of goods sold, margins, discounts, GMROI, and maybe we also add our on-hand quantity. And let's see how many we sold. This is PC, is for percentage. Now, in addition to kind of understanding which source queries have the data you're looking for, the other thing that takes a while to get used to is what each of these fields means. It's not always going to line up exactly with how it is in Retail Pro, but you kind of do piece together as you're going, PC equals percentage. Okay, so it does take a bit of time to get used to that. All these PL fields, that stands for price level. If you're not used to using multiple price levels, so you can have tons of different price levels in Retail Pro, and this one gives you the ability to report separately on up to the first 10 of them. Okay, let's also, let's see here, extended original price, extended price. So extended means, the price or original price multiplied by the quantity sold. And that should be good for now. So we'll press the asterisk over here on the left again to close it. We've got our DCS code and then our department name, class name, subclass name. So some of these are blank, so they haven't been using their classes or subclasses, which is okay for every item. We've got our description, description 2, attribute size, and some performance information. So let's move our quantity sold right up front. After our size. So we're going to do quantity sold. Then let's do the extended original price. Okay, so how much was it when we added it to the receipt? Extended price. So how much was it after they discounted it? And let's throw our discount amount right between. So if they discounted it, you can see here, the original price on the receipt was 15. We discounted it by 10 and sold it for 5. Our cost of goods sold on that item was $5.50. Margin, little under cost there, so that item's probably on the shelf for a while. trying to get it out of inventory. You've got a GMROI as well as your on-hand quantity. Okay, so we've quickly and easily added from a huge selection of fields. We've got both the Choose Fields button or the asterisk for doing that. We can click Best Fit again if some of these are kind of stretched out. So I've got everything back on one line again. We also have a couple options on the display here to add some totals. So if I want to add down here at the bottom, this is our totals bar. If I want to see the sum of all my quantities sold, so for the last 4 months in our demo data, they sold 1,109 items. But I also want to see, let's say the sum of the original price. I've got some discounts here. We've got some extra options. I can see the average discount as well. Average discount of $16.67. And maybe the average, let's do the sum of the on-hand. So 2,406 items of this left in stock. Okay, so that's just a little totals bar with access to some really basic info. If you don't want to have to export it to Excel and run it, if you're just looking for a basic, maybe on-hand total. Okay, we can also see that our grouping bar here, the dark blue bar, is empty. So if I wanted to group it all up by, let's say, size, drag that up to the top, every size is going to be listed on here separately. So everything is minimized under these groupings now. I can either click the plus sign to expand it, or I can press expand over here. It's going to expand all of the fields at once. Okay, so you can see that it's kind of grouped it up, but it's got this whole header here for size that it's put it under. So it doesn't really make for a great export yet. All right, and when you start grouping by multiple fields, let's collapse all this data. So if I want to group first by size, first by department code, or DCS code, and now by size, I've got it twice underneath here. So I'm getting the raw results, but I'm not able to just see, well, in my large accessories, what's the total? Because I'm running right now under data mode, which is going to give me the raw results. If I want to start grouping up where I can see totals for my group, so if I want to see, under my size department, maybe I'm in my jeans department and I've got my sizes and I want to see what my most popular sizes are. Well, I can see all the ones I sold in here, but I can't group them up to just see, I want to see a comparison across all the different sizes. I've got all these different results. That's the raw data mode. If you want to start grouping it up where you can see performance by these groups, that's where you're going to get into pivot, which we'll cover later. Okay, so I'm going to expand all these. I'm going to drag these fields right back down. But raw data mode is great for figuring out if this report has the fields that you're looking for. Okay, we also have some filtering options. So you'll see right here, layout is default, filter is blank. I can filter in a number of different ways. The easiest one is the filter bar here. So under each one of these fields, I can start typing in, did they have a jacket one? I can start typing in and quickly filter by a specific field. So I want my jackets, I want my size to be extra small, just want to see my sales for my extra small jackets. Okay. Clear it out. Press enter again, and we're back to all of our results. Each one of these columns also has a more advanced filter in it. So it's going to give me a list of everything in the field. Or I can choose custom if I wanted to, get a little more complicated. So my department name is, jackets. And also, let's say, or I don't know if they have another one in here for tops, maybe. All right, so tops was another department, so we can get a little more complicated that way. You can see down at the bottom, it's going to give us a list of all our active filters. So I've got a department name jackets or department name equals tops, and it's currently active. If I uncheck it, it's inactive, but still available down here for me to recheck. This little arrow, it's going to give us a list of any of the recently filtered recent filters we've saved. Okay, so I want my jackets, I want my tops. Maybe that's not good enough for us. We want to get even more advanced. That's where this filter button down here comes in on the navigation bar. That's our filter builder. All right, so I've got my filters. Department name is jackets, department name equals tops. Let's get even more complicated with it. I add a new condition. By default, it's country code. I can filter by any field. So it doesn't even have to be in use on the report. I can filter by that field. So maybe I want to filter by quantity sold. So I only want to report on ones that are greater than or equal to 1. So this report, I just want to see jackets, tops that are sold in the past 4 months, and where my, let's see, quantity on hand Okay, let me choose a different field. Let's try, actually, do that one more time without the enter or the space on the end and see if we can get that quantity field on there. There we go. And my on-hand quantity is less than or equal to 0. So I just want to see items, jackets and tops that I've sold in the last 4 months, where my quantity on hand is less than 0. And let's do not just sold, but let's do sold more than, 4 of them. So more than 1 a month. Press OK. So that's a pretty specific filter for those items where we've sold, quantity sold is greater than 4, and the quantity in stock is less than 0. Oh, these are all ors. So let's go back into my filter and change that to and. Okay, so I don't want it to be department is jackets, or I'm going to have to take one of these off because I can't have jackets and tops because it can only have one department. So let's take this one here off. And now it's jackets and quantity sold is greater than 4, and quantity on hand is less than or equal to 0. Oh, not bad. Okay. Let's make this a little lower. Too specific. We had jackets on there before. So and quantity And I'm just typing in here while I'm looking for these fields to highlight them. Let's try that 4 again. Let's try 1. Okay, so we don't have any jackets where we sold more than 4 of them in our demo data, which can make it a bit difficult. But it's also going by UPC level, so it's not just looking at the style; it's looking at every individual size. So I guess for this demo data, we didn't have any where we sold more than 4. But that's how easy to filter it is. So now we've got our department name equals jacket, on-hand quantity is 0, quantity sold over this period of time is greater than 1. Okay, if we want to save this filter, and we can see we went from 2,300 results down to 86. If we want to save it right now, we can press the save button next to the filter. We can give it a name. So I've given this filter a name, jackets. Maybe I should do department equals jackets, on hand equals 0, sold is greater than 1. Published means that any user can see it, and read only means that no one can ever edit that filter. So I'm just going to press save as without publishing it, so only I can see it. But you'll see it's now available on the filter list. Anytime I run this source query now, I will be able to choose this filter. If I save this report to my own personal Flexquery list, the filter will come with it, and I'll be able to choose from that filter that I've already set up. So if you have 3 stores and you're commonly filtering by store, you just set the filter by store for each one, for each store that you have. If you have an Edmonton, a Calgary, and a Banff store, you would create 3 filters, save them, and when you open the report, you can just quickly choose from the drop-down list the store that you're looking for. Those reports are all saved. As soon as I modify this, let's say I just want my department, I'm going to take out if it's not in stock, press OK, press the save button again, and we can remove the on-hand equals 0 requirement and save as. And now we can quickly switch between those 2 reports. You'll see the filter down here in the filter bar adjusts as we change it from the drop-down list. You can set up as many filters per report as you would like. We also have the layout. So when we're making changes to what fields we see, the order, the sorting, the grouping, that's all considered the layout. So we modified this pretty heavily from the default. If we want to save this, because if we were to close this and then run this report again, it would run with the fields, the default fields that it has. So if we want to save how our report looks, we need to make sure that we save the layout as well, which is the little disk here beside the layout. So just like saving a filter, you can have multiple layouts on the same report. So a product performance report has access to hundreds of fields. So maybe on this report that I need, I just want to see my quantity sold and my quantity on hand. Maybe I'm going to use this as part of my, looking at my purchase orders, what I'm going to order for the new year. Okay, but another one might just be looking at my original price, my discounts, my extended price, and maybe the associate on the sale. That way I can kind of go through and see, okay, well, which of my staff members are giving the biggest discounts? So all the same source query, but separate layouts for each one. All right, so I'm going to save this layout as, let's call this product. No, it's already under product performance. Let's call this department DCS with sold on hand KPI. All right, so it's been updated. If there was some information on here some extra information, like if I wanted that UPC back, all I need to do is add that field. It's already dragged it at the front. Press save as again. I can save over top of it if I want, but I saved it as read only, so it's not going to let me. So this one I'm going to say UPC/DCS with my sold, on hand, and KPI. Press save as, and I can quickly, just like with the filters, go back and forth between those two different layouts. So without UPC and with UPC. If you've got layouts, I mean, I just did it with one field, but you can have, completely separate fields. And remember, using the filter builder, we can filter by fields that aren't even on the report. So this is basic stuff, but it can get pretty complicated pretty quickly. And that's just kind of getting used to it and practicing and seeing where you can take it. Okay, finally, the last thing I kind of want to cover in here, we have some extra options. If we click on a column and go to View Options, let's go to our column options. Okay, you can give them custom names. That's a popular one. So display name instead of subclass name, we can just call it subclass, and use display. Okay, so we've modified the name of the report. If you have an Excel report that needs to go into another program, that's really handy. That's part of the layout, so you would need to save your layout once you're done. It's really handy so that the mapping's already lined up. You don't have to change the names of your other program to match Flexquery or vice versa. Okay, you can change it all in here. When you export the report into Excel, it's ready to be imported into your plugin or other program, accounting program that you're using, whichever that it is. That's pretty much it for the raw data mode and a look around. The last final thing we might want to do is update my Flexquery. So saving the layout, saving the filter, that's not saving the report under my Flexquery where you can quickly find your custom report later. That's just updating the source query with a layout and filter option that you can use the next time you run it. If you want that saved in that My Flexquery list of customized reports, we need to update My Flexquery. We need to choose the default filter we want it to start on. So this is your date range. Let's say when I run this, I always want it to run for the previous quarter. So I'm going to say go back 3 months and run for 3 months. I want the previous 3 months. Choose our default filter. So I want my department jackets with no on hand, but I sold more than one as my default filter. My layout, I want the one without UPC as my default layout when I open it. And you can see that there's a separate one for pivot. So when we run this report in pivot mode, we'll have to recreate the layout because they have completely separate layouts. Column selection. So I explained that there's 100 or so columns available for this report. You can, if you want, just tell it to retrieve data for the columns that you have specified in your layout instead of having all that extra data ready and waiting in the background. It doesn't improve the speed that much, but if it's a really big report and you want to see a speed increase when you run it, you can use this option. Retrieve data for select columns, and then add all the columns I currently have visible to my selected list. So it's only going to, when it runs the report, it's only going to bring back the results for exactly these fields here, and all the other ones, the data wouldn't be there if you added them after. Okay, so that's when we're adding and removing our columns. You can start adding them, but there's no data there because it didn't collect it. All right, so I don't usually use this unless the report is really big. Global settings, we want this one to open up in our query data, so that's just our data view. Groups, so you can set these groups in your settings for Flexquery. That allows you, that determines where under My Flexquery the report gets saved to. Okay, so I'm going to save it under the KPI group. Category, stock management, type, inventory, performance. I usually just leave that the same. You can modify this, but these are the ones that are coming from the source query. And if you're going to get used to where these source queries are, I think it's a good idea to leave them the same so that you can kind of figure out which reports and which fields are on which ones. Finally, we've got published, other users can access it, and Flexecute. This is the scheduling program. It is brand new, so I'm not going to get into it today because we just won't have enough time. That allows you to start scheduling your reports by basically choosing how we want it to export, where we want it to export to, and then it's going to do the export based on the group that you put it in. So there's another program called Flexquery we tell it when to run which groups. So back here on our global settings, we put it in KPIs. So we would say run our KPIs every Monday morning. And you can have a report in multiple groups. So if I wanted one that was, run on this week, I could have that one scheduled, but also be able to find it under KPIs and run it whenever I need. Okay, so I've saved it. Product performance by DCS with sold, on hand, and KPI. And when we exit this report by pressing close, and we go up to My Flexquery, let's expand all of our reports. Oh, I've got my physical inventory search on there. There's my KPIs, stock management, inventory performance, product performance. So now I've saved it to My Flexquery, which is where we save it by group. So I put it in group KPI, and then the category and the type I left the same. Okay, now sometimes I find you need to close Flexquery and reopen it in order for it to refresh that information when you go to run that report. Okay, just a good idea. If you find any issues after you've just built a report, close Flexquery, reopen it, and run the report from My Flexquery, and you should be good to go. Okay, I'm going to run this report one more time, but we're going to do it this time in pivot mode. So taking a little bit longer than I expected, but that's all right. It's okay to be thorough. We're going to run this in pivot. We'll probably skip chart because it's very seldom used, and most users find Excel to be a little more, they're a little more comfortable with it if they need to build charts, so they're just not really needing charts at all. So we built a custom query with our own layout, our own filter. We saved it to My Flexquery. Let's have a look at how pivots work. Okay, so when I ran the report, I clicked pivot down here to run it in pivot by default. While you have a report open though, you can switch between data, pivot, and chart as needed. Okay, I'll show you that quick as soon as it opens. Okay, so pivot mode by default can look a little intimidating. That's because there's no pivot set up, no layout set up at all for this one. It's giving us every available field and saying, okay, well, there you go, start designing your pivot table. First thing you're going to want to do is click unused fields to remove those. Okay, so this is our pivot chart here, and we can start adding those fields back when we need to. But it's too many fields on there to work with. Some of the reports only have 10 or 20 fields, and that's okay. But for this one, it's not really worth keeping all those unused fields available to start dragging and dropping. So you can drag the unused fields and drop them into place, but we'll use the pivot designer instead because I find it much easier. You can see we're on the pivot tab, but I could click data, chart to open them up on there. They've got a spreadsheet button. That's basically a mini built-in Excel. It'll let you do a few basic calculations if you don't have Excel on your computer for some reason, and then you can print off the report. Okay, so if you don't have Excel, the spreadsheet, it's not a full data organizing tool. It's not Excel. It's just basic spreadsheet with a couple options for putting in sums and totals and averages, stuff like that you can then print off your report without having to export it or open it in Excel. We've got a couple extra options on here. So you can see it's gone back to the default layout with no filter. So the filters from our original one don't copy over to the pivot. All right, you have to create your own separate layouts and filters in pivot mode. We're going to open up the pivot designer, which allows us to start designing our pivot table. So by default, they've put the store name in our row area. We're going to take that off, and we're going to add, let's say, D name, our department name, to the row area. And then I want to see some of those fields that we'd added before. So let's do our extended original price, our extended price. We'll throw in the discount right in between there, and our cost of goods sold. And again, it takes a bit of time to get used to where all these fields are be. In Pivot Designer, they are at least in alphabetical order again. Our quantity on hand, quantity sold. You can see this time what's interesting is all that raw data is in the background, but Pivot is going to group it up by whatever fields you have in the row area. So row area is your grouping, and data area is the information you want to see for that grouping. There's also a column area. They've got subsidiary in there, so since they're all under the same subsidiary, it's not going to start breaking it up. But if we took this out and put in one of the other fields, like our class, you can see how that's going to affect it. So we put in our class name under the column. You can see up at the top, it's now organizing by class first. So these are items without a class, then by department. These are items with class ATE, then department, then you've got your data. Okay, so most of the time you won't need it, but sometimes it's handy to have the extra sorting in the column field. I'm going to take it off. So let's go by department name. We've got our quantity, then our quantity on hand, our quantity sold, price, discount, extended price, cost of goods sold. What else would we like to have a look at? Maybe let's add in our some SRO fields. So these are a bit handy. What's our PO due quantity? So how many of these do we have on outstanding POs that are due to come in? Okay, there's not many purchase orders in this demo data, but we do have some results coming up here. And then, because I want to see, well, I've got all these items that I've got on hand. I've got some sold. How many do I have on order? And let's break it down even further. So right now we're at department name, but we talked about earlier, I wanted to see the size breakdown by department. So now we've got our departments and these little plus signs. I can close the Pivot Designer, press expand, and it's broken it down not just by department, but then by size, and I've got my results. So I grouped it twice. First, give me the department, then size, then group up my sales information so I can have a look. And I can say, okay, well, in my denim department, you know, sizes 27 and 28 are twice as popular as the rest. Okay, I've got 17 and 10 sold, and also sizes 29. So, you know, I've got 15 of size 29 sold and only 12 on hand, and it's one of my most popular sizes. So maybe that's something I'm looking at. Depends on the report that you're running and what you need it for. Same with jackets. I've got 25 of the large, 27 medium, and then the small. And it looks like I'm covered pretty evenly on hand for these items. You know, but maybe I'm wondering why there's some sizes that I'm not moving. Okay, there's my extra small. If I had, you know, 25 of these on hand, but only 13 compared to the sales for the other departments, okay, well, maybe my extra small jackets, you know, I need to look into some of these brands and see if maybe the extra smalls are a little too small for customers because I'm not moving as many of them. All right, so Pivot Designer allows you to start grouping up your information so that you're not looking at each individual result by item. You can start grouping it up. You know, maybe you want to see, let's go back into our Pivot Designer, and let's throw the attribute in there as well. So I want to see my most popular colors for some of these sizes. Is there some colors that I'm overstocked on? Okay, I'm going to close the Pivot Designer, expand the fields again. So let's go back to my jackets. That's accessories. Now let's go back to my denim. Okay, size 27 in my denim. We've got all these different color codes on here. We can see the on hand and the sales amount for each one. Okay, so I've got some khaki sold. IRD where I don't have any in stock, that might be something I'm looking into, depending on what the need of the report is. Okay, so you can get as complicated, as detailed. You can drill it right down by UPC and essentially have a raw data report if that's what you're looking for. And these fields are easily just dragged and dropped from the fields list to the row area in order to change your grouping. Okay, so now I've got denim with my color breakdown. So what are my most popular colors in denim? And I've got my KPIs and some sold information in behind it in my on hands. Okay, that's the best way to start organizing your pivots. When you export this, you'll find it's not super Excel friendly. Okay, so I'm going to export this onto my export Excel folder, and we'll open it up. Oh, looks like somebody forgot to put Excel on our demo. But what's going to happen is all these grouping fields, this denim is only going to appear once in one giant field. It's going to look in Excel exactly like it looks on here. And that's always been an issue. So a recent update to Flexquery fixed that by giving us the summary data option down on the right here. So by clicking on summary data, it's going to say, okay, I'm going to take all this grouping information, but I'm going to make it a little easier for Excel to work with. And I'll just give that a second to load up. Okay, so now my tops, instead of giving it one big, huge field that just says tops in it once when I export it, it's broken it out onto each line. So it's a lot easier for you to work with in Excel or for your accounting program to import. That's the summary data option. And you can just click that again to go back to your pivot. We've got a couple extra options here in pivot mode. I'll just let that reboot. Okay, while that's opening up back again in Pivot, you can see down at the bottom we've got our export. You can choose from multiple Excel versions. Depending on which version you're running, we can choose PDFs if we need to, and I think text files. We've also got our printing option, so if you want to print the report off, it's going to squeeze it all in. Keep that in mind. It always likes to try and squeeze it all into one page, so keep that in mind when you're trying to print off really, really big reports, but there's some options in there if you need to print it out properly as well. If you're interested in the scheduling of the reports, I'll try and do a mini webinar on that later once we've had a little more time, because it is brand new, to work with it and get it, plan it out and make sure that we can show you exactly how to set them up properly. But in the meantime, if you really want to get working on it, just give the support a call or an email and let us know, and we'll find some time to work with you on it. Other than that, we covered pretty much everything else. So the last thing I just wanted to cover were some options on our pivot table. And I know that because there's so much different demo data in this thing, it can give Flexquery a bit of an issue sometimes. So there's no supporting documents for any of the inventory in the demo. So there's no vouchers and no purchase orders and all that kind of stuff that you really need in a Retail Pro 9 database. Because everything is so linked together, unlike Retail Pro 8. So sometimes it can give Flexquery a bit of an issue on our demo server, but for live clients who have all that proper data in there, we don't normally see any issues. What I'm going to do to save time, because we are already going over here, I'm just going to force it closed. I'll give it a second before I reload it, or it's going to bug me about the licensing because it does take a second for it to register that that license is not in use. So kind of like Retail Pro 9, you can get, you have some user licenses available, and then you can have different users use the program at different times. So it's the concurrent licensing where it's just going to detect how many users are using the program at one time. If you are interested in Flexquery, let us know or contact the sales department at CRS. That's sales@retailbycrs.com, and they can get you some pricing information. Okay, so let me load up that source query again. I'll do it for an even shorter date, and we can finish this up quickly. I believe it was sales performance, stock management. Okay, so I forgot to save that layout before I went and moved into summary data, which I probably should have done. Just like in the raw data mode, you have access to update my Flexquery. Works the exact same way, except for under your layout, you're going to save it to open in pivot mode. Okay, so under your global settings, you would set the default mode to pivot, and you would set the default pivot layout. You can also actually ask it to open directly in summary data. So if this is a report you run every Monday morning, you export it immediately into Excel, you can tell it open in summary data where it's ready to be exported right away. Okay, I can use the pivot designer to quickly add a few fields here again, and then we can review some of the last settings. So let's do our department name again, take store name off, and let's have a look at some sales information. So we'll do extended original price, discount, extended price, cost of goods sold, and margin. Kind of your most basic sales data. So right now we've only got one field in our row area, so it's grouping it first only by department, but we can get a little more complicated with it. Let's put on our, let's say our size again, or maybe class name. So our department and then our class. We'll close this and expand those fields. So and a lot of these departments actually don't have a secondary class. We've got some more options at the top for column totals, row totals. You can see down here at the bottom, if you have row totals turned on and you have multiple groups or multiple rows that you've added, then it's going to give you a subtotal for the ones where there are multiple fields available. So let's add on size because it's going to look a little better, or attribute works fine instead of class because this demo data doesn't use many classes. Okay, so now a lot of these have a lot of different information. With row totals enabled, we're going to get that subtotal under each of our first groups. Okay, as long as it has more than one of the second group available, it's going to report on that subtotal. So we can see our accessories total. Row totals is going to give us our grand totals at the very bottom. So if we scroll all the way down, we can see our grand totals down here. We can take those off. Keep in mind when you go to summary data mode, those specific lines are not exported. Okay. Always fully expanded is kind of nice when you're using the pivot designer. You don't have to use the expand and collapse buttons to hide or expand those group fields. Let's see. We can also there's filtering options the same way as that we have in the raw data. We have the ability in the pivot designer to add fields specifically for filtering. So if I want to filter by a field that's not on here, I can, let's say I want to filter it by my DCS code. Now I've got the option on here to start choosing or including specific DCS codes that I want to view. So we do it just for our addresses, and it filters down the information and changes what we have, what we can see. So all the addresses are in this one department name, but then we have multiple attributes, and so we filtered this down to just our address department. Okay. And then maybe because we filtered it down, we also want to see the size information. So again, we're just either dragging it to the row area for our groups, or sometimes the column area if we want a secondary grouping, or to the data area for the information that we want to see. So what did I just say? Size. So we'll do size and then attribute. Okay, so I've got my department, size, attribute, and let's also say I'm going to use this for planning some of my purchase orders. I'm going to add the vendor code as well. Okay, so first by, we'll drag that vendor code up. First by vendor, then department, size, attributes. Okay, so that's 4 levels of grouping on here. And we can see there's a couple that don't have any information under them, but that's all right. And we'll take the subsidiary name off because it's not needed. Okay, so just like with our layouts, I've got a filter if I want to save it. I can use the save button. I've got the layouts that I can filter. Oh, wrong button. I can save this layout. Vendor code, department, size, attribute, sales. So now when I run this report later, I can, I took one of those off, didn't I? Let's take that off. I can update my Flexquery in order to save this specific pivot to my Flexquery where I can access it later. So I've got my default date, my filter, layout, I set my global settings and save. Then I can have it open up automatically in summary data on Monday morning when I'm ready to run the report, or if I need to export it and put it into another program or send it to a supplier, depending on how you set up the report and what it's doing. Okay, so that's pretty much it. This is that's the summary data again, so we can see the vendor code, department name, size, attribute, and our sales data. I'm going to close this off. That's as much time as we have for today. Went a little bit slower than I thought, so I didn't get to cover the charts. If you want some more information for that, we can definitely get you a copy of the Flexquery manual to have a look. Other than that, thank you everyone for coming, or for the future listeners from YouTube. If you have any questions, of course, as always, our Platinum clients, you can call into the support line anytime. If you're not a Platinum client, go ahead and send us an email, and we'll see what we can do. And if you are interested in purchasing the program, let us know in support or in sales, and someone will be able to get some pricing to you pretty quickly. And then we'll just it's a pretty quick install to get it up and running, and we can help you maybe find the first few source queries you're looking for your custom reports. Okay. You can reach the support department at support@retailbycrs.com or 1-866-204-5000. 5511. I'll send a copy of this to everyone in attendance or on the webinar sign-up list, and it will be available on our website in the retail resources section later. Thanks.